Welcome back to the 26th Annual Austin Film Festival. We're here with probably one of the few humans who's written every type of Star Wars thing you can think of. Book, TV, film, comic book. Gary,
yeah, that's right.
You're like a do-it-all everywhere type of guy.
My weird brag is that I'm the only person I think who's written Star Wars for film, television, books, and comics. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Before we dive into Star Wars fun, I've got a lot of fun questions about that. I found out something today that I want to pick your brain about. Are you a Spurs fan?
I am. Tottenham Hotspur FC. They play Liverpool tomorrow. I'm not optimistic.
No, we're going to get killed.
Yeah. Oh, you're a Spurs fan as well?
I am.
Not having a great season, are we?
No.
Did good midweek against Red Star.
Yeah, but 3 losses before that kind of defeated
not
the
great.
purpose.
Not great. I don't know what's gone wrong.
Everyone's there. Ali's been injured a little bit, and Son had another swan song with Korea, but still, I don't get it. I don't get it. What's going on?
I don't know. We were doing so great, and then maybe it's the curse of the new stadium. I don't know.
It's a beautiful stadium. They play
beautiful,
football.
Gorgeous. I prefer some decent results, though.
Watch us just beat the living hell out of Liverpool and then just quiet everyone down.
Let's see what happens. All right.
That'll be good. Yeah, they're doing the big Austin Premier League mornings. Are here in Austin.
Oh, there was a guy I was speaking to earlier, and he had a Premier League scarf on, and apparently there's some big event that's happening here.
Yeah, they've got they had Alan Shearer. He'll be there.
Okay.
So you can go yell about Newcastle and. Trying to think, Tim Howard and the whole crews that are all there.
Right.
Men in Blazers.
The Robbies.
Yeah, the double Robbies.
Yeah, the two Robbies.
Yeah, they're all there, and they're going to be. They get there from 6:30 the first game, and then all the way to the last game.
That's great. I'm very grateful for the fact, living as a Brit living in America, that there's actually it's legitimately the Premier League coverage here is actually really good.
It's almost better than Sky Sports over in.
Yeah, I like it. I like they have really good commentators. Pretty much you can find pretty much every game. Yeah. It's great. It's just like being at home. I miss Match of the Day, but other than that, it's great.
Oh yeah, well they can't play the whole thing. That's
right.
We like more goals in America. I guess
right.
It's sad. But I was so happy when I heard you were a Spurs fan. I got giddy and freaked out. And
I'm glad to hear. We got to stick together.
Yeah. So let's dive into your career and writing. I would love to know, writing-wise, different mediums like comics, scripts. Is it the same process, same time? Is it completely different? How do you approach the different realms, or does it not matter? You just write an idea and go from there?
I think, regardless of the medium, the storytelling medium that you're working in, there are basic universal rules that apply across all media. You want to have compelling characters and a well-structured story. And all of the things that we talk about here at an event like Austin Film Festival, like the craft of storytelling, applies across pretty much all media. Beyond that, yeah, a script for a comic book doesn't look exactly like the script for a movie. Obviously, the way that you write a novel is very, very different. I've tried to kind of diversify and not limit myself strictly to writing feature films, even though that's kind of my first language and where I've been most successful and what I'm best known for. Partly just as a kind of as a pragmatic thing. For me, I just want to tell a story and get it in front of an audience. As it just so happens that doing that as a feature film is the hardest way to do it. It costs the most money. It requires the most number of people. Like when you write a movie script, you haven't really made anything. You haven't built the house. You've just created the blueprint for the house. Yeah. And then the producers and directors, now everyone has to come along, the financiers, and by the time the house is built, it might not look anything like the house that you designed, and that can be really frustrating. I've had I've had 3 movies made and had 3 very different experiences. The Book of Eli is almost exactly the script that I wrote. Almost, I would say 98% the script that I wrote. Yeah. The After Earth is very little like the script that I wrote, because it changed so much through rewrites and production. And I have my name on the movie because of the weird way that WGA credits work, but I can't take a lot of credit for that. film, because I honestly don't recognize most of it. And Rogue One is kind of like 50-50. There's a lot of my DNA in there that I recognize, but there's also a lot of DNA of other writers. I can point to a bunch of stuff on screen. That's mine, that's mine, that's mine. But then I would also say, that's Chris Weiss, that's Tony Gilroy, that's John Knoll, and then, everyone, that was a much more collaborative effort. But I guess what I'm saying is when I now want to tell a story, unless I think it's an absolute kind of commercial slam dunk for a feature film, I'm not going to waste my time writing it as a spec script that people are probably not going to want to make. So if I have an idea that I'm really in love with, but I feel like might be a real commercial struggle to get made, I've been doing this long enough now. I've been in this business for 17 years, and I've become quite good at anticipating all the reasons why a studio might say no to something, or feel like it's uncommercial, or it's too much of a financial risk. But I really want to still tell the story, so I'll find some other way to do it. Maybe I'll write it as a novel. Maybe I'll write it as a comic book. I've done that in the past. I had like a medieval horror story that I really wanted to write. Felt that it would be too hard to write that as a spec screenplay. Like, people wouldn't want to make the movie, so I wrote it as a novel, and it got published as a novel. And again, the story found an audience, and that was the end game for me. The very first piece of material that I ever broke in with, this kind of weird science fiction retelling of Oliver Twist. I decided to write that as a comic book instead. And of course, the great irony is, once it becomes a comic book, now people are knocking on my door saying, hey, do you want to make a movie out of this? Because now it's a piece of underlying material. It's a piece of IP. So it's worked for me in a number of ways. Again, it's an easier way for me to find an audience. Even if I write a novel, I know even without, I don't even need a publisher. These days, I can self-publish it. There are many great stories like The Martian, Wool, 50 Shades of Grey are all like really successful books that went on to be movies that were based on that were self-published. Yeah. So that's a very valid avenue for aspiring writers these days, is self-publishing. And then so the story finds an audience. That's the end game for me. But then it can also create an additional opportunity for the piece to find its way to the screen, rather than take the direct route. Create it as a piece of intellectual property in another medium, which then becomes more attractive for studio executives and TV producers and people like that to maybe want to then adapt into. It's weird the way this business works, but that's how it works.
Then that's crazy to think, then do you, like, working with image, is it so much easier than working with a movie people, or are there still similarities even on the back end of figuring out how to get a comic made or get the comic put out?
I can't speak for other comic authors. I can just tell you that, for example, on Oliver, for better or worse, I don't get a single creative note. Wow. What you see on the page is 100% unfiltered my and Derek's vision. There are no executives, there are no producers, there are no creative notes, there are no rewrites or revisions. I can't be fired and replaced by another writer. All of the things that can make feature film writing a scary business as a novelist or as a comic book writer, those are completely absent. When I wrote my first novel, I went through an editorial process with an editor, and they suggested changes and revisions. I got notes just like I would on a film, but I didn't have to do them. So some of the notes were really great, and I did them. Some of the notes I understood the point of the note, but I had a different way of approaching it, and so I did the note in a different way. And some notes I just put my foot down and said, nope, I like it the way it is. I'm not doing it. Now, if I were ever to say I like it the way it is and I'm not doing the note in the feature film business, I'm very likely fired the next day, and they'll bring in someone who will do it the way they want it. So it was actually a very cathartic and very liberating experience to realize that in literature and in comics, again, for better or worse, I'm often very grateful for notes, because they will often make, if you work with smart executives and smart producers, they will identify problems in your story that you were not able to identify yourself. And when the development process works well, it will make the story better. But sometimes notes aren't always helpful, and you don't always agree with them. But one way or another, you better find a way to do them, because you're there in service of ultimately their vision. But in literature and in comic books, on Oliver, I never saw a note. So if there's something in Oliver, the comic book, that you liked or didn't like, I'll take all of the credit for the things you like and all of the blame for the things you didn't like. Often, like, for example, on Rogue One, someone will say to me, "Oh, I love the character Chirrut," and I'll say, "That's great, but you should tell that to Chris Weitz, because he created that character." Or somebody might say, "I didn't like that line of dialogue," and I say, "Well, that wasn't me. That was it. But go talk to this guy, but if it is me, then I will happily accept, the credit or the blame.
That's so cool. Well, I've got to ask that. You brought a Book of Eli. Did you really write that in like a week?
Yeah, 6 days, 20 pages a day, 16 hours a day.
When it comes to you that quickly, is it scary, or are you like, I've got it?
It was just it's never happened to me again. It's never been replicable. I've never written anything that quickly again. It was just like a fever dream. I had an idea for a story that I really wanted to tell. It was a very, very simple story. If you look at the film that was made, the story has very few moving parts. It's not a complex story plot-wise. It's pretty much a straight line. There's a big reveal and a twist at the end and stuff like that, but it's a very straightforward story. And I spent a few weeks thinking about the characters, and they got inside my head, and it became a story I really wanted to tell. But I knew it was a very uncommercial story. Basically a guy in the desert with a machete and a Bible chopping people's heads off and quoting scripture. I was like, no one's ever going to make this. But I was so enamored with the story that the only way to kind of like exorcise it, to like get it out, was to write it. And so I knew that if I told my managers, my representatives about it, they would talk me out of writing it. So we'll never be able to sell that. That's too ridiculous. So I just didn't tell them. I didn't want to be talked down off the ledge. I really wanted to write it. And so I went and kind of locked myself in my little home office, and like I said, 16 hours. I wasn't aware. I didn't intend to do that. I would just look at the clock, and it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd written 25 pages. Wow. And it just kind of happened that way. And a week later, I had a script, and it was very rough. I cleaned it up a little bit and sent it to my managers, and they were like, well, you've written it now. We might as well try. No going back. Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We might as well try to sell it. And we sold it. And I guess if there's a moral of the story, if you have something that you really, really believe in, don't let anyone talk yourself down off. Don't let anyone talk you down off the ledge. Go write it, because sometimes it can really work out. I owe my whole career to that movie.
Wow, that's so cool. Video games?
I like video games.
Well, your background, a PC gamer. Are you still an avid gamer? What do you play?
Right now, when I get home, I'm going to play the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I'm very excited about the new Outer Worlds game that just came out. The most recent thing that I finished was Untitled Goose Game, which I absolutely loved. I want to see if anyone's going to make a movie out of Untitled Goose Game. Is it doable? Someone's got to try, right?
CGI like hell. That's a lot of stuff.
Borderlands 3, I've really been enjoying lately. There's a game on Apple Arcade called Grindstone, which I'm addicted to. There's a lot. I still play games all the time. They're really in my DNA, and it's still a part of my professional life as well, as given that a lot of games get translated into movies, and games themselves are becoming more ambitious in their storytelling and are trying to tell more cinematic stories. I do a lot of that work. I work and I consult on the narrative aspects of a lot of video games. That's
so cool. So you've never really not been involved in video games. I feel like people think you've got out of it, but it's always been a part. I
got my first job in video games at like 15, and I did it until I was like 27, 28, and that's when I transitioned over into screenwriting. But what was kind of fortuitous timing about that was just as I was transitioning over, that was just at the time that video games as a medium was starting to evolve and become more ambitious in storytelling. And now back in the day when you used to get a video game, like you'd read the review and it would say, well, the story's not very good, but what do you expect? It's a video game. That's not an excuse anymore. People expect video games, if you're going to have a story, to have a good one. And the really good video, I think like a good example off the top of my head is like The Last of Us. That has and the Uncharted games, like those games have stories that are as good and characters and dialogue that's as good as anything you would see from like a big Hollywood production. So the standard has been reset, and people now will rightly ding a video game if the storytelling feels like it's been phoned in. And so we're seeing that evolution happen right now, and video game companies that never used to have like narrative departments now are very quickly spinning those up, and that's like a whole new thread of video game development that never used to exist. In the meantime, they've kind of been outsourcing some of that to people like me that will come in and consult and help them, because I've already got some kind of institutional storytelling knowledge, and I also understand the language of video games because I spent so long in that world. But increasingly, that's a skill set that is being brought. In the same way that like Pixar has a story department, and Lucasfilm has a dedicated story department. The big video game developers are increasingly building their own internal story departments.
As someone who's now written and done so much work in the Star Wars world, not just like Rogue One, but like Rebels and creating whole new elements of Star Wars, did it ever impact your love of the original films? Has it increased it, decreased it, now that you kind of know the ins and outs of the behind the scenes of Star Wars? I mean, you've been able to work with George Lucas, but also on the new stuff, and you've had stuff like Rogue One where they have changed your work, you know, the ending being not what it originally was, or stuff like that.
I mean that's true on any big studio movie, and I made my peace with that a long time ago. And I understand. Again, it's the greatest professional privilege of my life to work in the Star Wars universe, but I went into it with my eyes open, very aware of the fact that I was grateful and lucky to be invited to play in someone else's sandbox, and that it was ultimately their $4 billion property, and it was for me to respect the fact that this is this belongs to someone else, not to me. And I tried to kind of bring as much as I could to it within those parameters. And I'm really proud of some of the. I got to create little kind of canonical things that will now be part of the Star Wars, canon forever, and that's a great thrill for me. But am I don't have any resentment or disappointment about the fact that not everything I suggested got used. That's just development on any big movie. But yeah, it was a real thrill to be able to work on Rebels, which in its own way crossed over into Rogue One, and I don't know. I mean, I'm as excited to see Episode 9 as anyone else, and I'm as excited to see the Mandalorian as anyone else. And in fact, I'm really rooting for example, the Mandalorian is created by Dave Filoni, who I became very good friends with from working at Lucasfilm. So I'm rooting for him, and I'm rooting for Star Wars. I want there to be more. I want Star Wars to be great going forward, and it's in great hands. I'm confident it will. It does have a bright future, and again, it's, if anything, it made me more passionate and more excited about it, because I feel like I've still got some residual skin in the game, because Star Wars is being continued to be made by people like Rian Johnson, who's a good friend of mine. Like, these are people, they're my friends, and I root for them to succeed. So I feel like will forever now have kind of a vested personal interest in the ongoing success of Star Wars.
As far as what's down the pipeline, I feel like you've got a lot of different ideas, but is there anything you can share with us about what's coming up next for you?
I'm working on a big studio movie right now that I'm not permitted to talk about, because it's yet another one where I had to sign all the NDAs, and it's fun to work on Star Wars and Marvel and all this kind of stuff, but you're not allowed to talk about any of it until after it's done. When Rogue One came out, I was like, I can finally talk about it. I had to sit on all these secrets for such a long time. I knew Darth Vader was in the movie long before anyone had a clue, but I couldn't tell anybody. So when it was finally revealed, that was a big thrill for me. I just finished a new novel, which will be out hopefully next year. I'm halfway through Oliver, the comic book series, so I think we're on issue 5 right now of a 12-issue series, and I've got a number of TV projects that I'm trying to get off the ground.
Oh, TV. Would you ever, on a showrunner level, would you ever embrace being a showrunner on TV, even though that might eat up your time?
I don't know how good I would be at bossing people around. And that's a very reductive view of what a showrunner does. One of the things that's very attractive about TV, and many feature writers that have crossed the Rubicon into TV will tell you, writers have a lot more creative equity in television. They have a lot more authority in television creatively than they do in film. In film, as a screenwriter, you often find yourself kind of sitting at the kids' table, and you want to be involved in every aspect of production because it's fascinating, but you're not always invited to be. You're a guest of other aspects of the production. I often equate it to being like a party planner. You plan the party. It's okay, we're going to go to this planet and we're going to blow this up, and then this is going to happen, and this cool character is going to show up. But then once you've planned everything, they say, okay, fine, thank you for planning the party. We're going to go off and have it now and actually go shoot the movie. But you may not always be invited. And on every movie set that I've been on, I've always felt a little bit like a trespasser on my own movie set. Even on the Book of Eli, where no one on that set is there unless I have. They're all there because of me, because I dreamed up this idea that eventually became manifest, and yet I felt like a weird imposter, trying to stay out of people's way, because eventually the thing that you created outgrows you and becomes something bigger and becomes the responsibility of many, many other people. In television, you'll never feel like an imposter on your own set because you know it's your set. In television, you're running the show, and I want to take a holistic approach to movie making and television. I want to be involved in every aspect of production because it's fascinating. It's just interesting. It's just fascinating to me, and so television just inherently affords a greater opportunity for writers to be more involved in every aspect of production.
What are you reading and watching TV wise?
I'm ashamed to admit I have a shockingly bad media diet. I eat a lot of like television junk food.
Please share some of your
well, I mean, look, and that's not always true. I just started watching Watchmen on HBO, which is terrific. I've got a big backlog of things that I really want to get to and watch. But the truth is, by the time I'm done writing and get my kid to bed, my brain is so exhausted that I end up just watching like house flipping shows and just like garbage that you can kind of watch with your brain disengaged. I just need to shift into neutral. And so, and many writers will admit we've all got terrible video game backlogs. We've all got terrible, Blu-ray things that I should really watch that award screener, and I end up watching like World's Most Haunted Hotels or like whatever nonsense is on like A&E that night. Like everyone's laughing because they all recognize that's what we all watch. We should be watching much more edifying stuff, but every now and again we need to turn our brains off.
Being here at Austin Film Festival, I feel like this festival has so much of a rich history, but it's also got so much of a vibrancy to it that no other festival carries the creator on such a high pedestal. It's got to be rewarding being at a festival that highlights your work and not just someone else taking your work and making it look like something bigger.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that. Austin, as a celebration of screenwriting and screenwriters, is, I think, unique in the world, certainly on this level. And I just appreciate the opportunity to come and meet other writers, my peers, who, you'd be surprised how little writers hang out with one another because we're not always the most social animals. We tend to kind of like hunker down in our pajamas and just write. Every time I go to LA, you can tell that's David Mandel over there, can't you? So David Mandel is a huge Star Wars fan, and I totally cashed that in to sneak onto. He let me onto
life-size Jedi.
He let me onto the set of Veep because I worked on Star Wars, and I got to hang out on the last season of Veep. I love David; he's great. Where was I? Where was I? I've totally lost my track.
Oh
yeah, so there are many screenwriters here, people that I only know through social media because that's how we all connect now, through Twitter. That's how we all know each other. And so like people that I consider myself friends with as screenwriters, like on social media, people like C. Robert Cargill and Liz Hanna and Stephanie Folsom and Emily Carmichael, people that I follow on Twitter and admire kind of from afar as fellow writers. This is the first opportunity I've ever go, oh my God, you're here. I actually get to meet you and talk to you. And the business that we're in, this particularly weird, very narrow, creative sliver of screenwriting, which has all its own very, very specific, anxieties and neuroses and creative and commercial things that we worry about all day. I very rarely get to share those things with someone else who speaks that same language. So whenever I go to LA, I won't name them. I don't want to out them, but like two other really good screenwriter friends of mine who we always go out to dinner and we have what I call the this fucking business conversation, where we just kind of bellyache and talk about all the problems that we have. Like, oh my God, I got these notes and this project's dead and this guy's an asshole, and we kibitz and we gossip and we have our little bitch session, and I get to do that kind of writ large here. I get to meet writer friends that I know, and I get to see them after a long time. I get to meet new friends, and I made a bunch of new contacts here, and maybe I meet someone here and we go off and write a movie together. Like, it's a great obviously it's a great networking opportunity for people that want to break into the business, and we all know what value the festival has for those people, the pre-pros and the aspiring writers. But it's also a great opportunity for established writers like myself to meet other writers that I wouldn't otherwise meet. We talk and we meet far less often than you might think, and so we're all kind of like thrown together by fate here in like one place at the one time at the Driscoll Bar here. It's a great opportunity for us to talk and share our war stories and compare scars like the scene in Jaws. It's like, I'll show you a scar. It's like, I got fired off a movie on my first day, like this kind of thing. Like it's fun to be able to cry on each other's shoulders and talk about the weirdness of this very peculiarly emotionally abusive but often very rewarding business that we're all in.
Dave said he doesn't have a project coming up in the next few months. There's any way you, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and you could do a Star Wars theme show?
It would be hard for me to imagine. I mean, you've just like, I would never even have thought of that. But you've just like, if you said to me, would you want to do any project with Dave? Of course, I would jump into shark infested waters to do that. He's a genius. But and do I want to see? He's over there going fuck you. He's great. And Julia, they're all tremendously talented people, and I would love to. David is such a fan. I personally, if I were Kathy Kennedy, I would give David Mandel a job in the Star Wars universe like that. Wouldn't you want to see what he would make?
Amazing.
I would love that. I would love that.
So lastly, another thing about not Austin Film Festival, but Austin related, is there anything you love coming to check out while you're here in Austin, or hidden finds you've been able to? Or I
had one of the best meals of my life here several years ago at a place called Perry's Steakhouse. Do you know Perry's?
Yeah.
I had one, like a truly great meal, like the 4-hour meal where you just blow it all out and it's like $200 a head, but you're there with great company and you tell stories. Like those kind of truly great meals are things that you remember and talk about for the rest of your life. And that was like 5 years ago I had that, and I'm still talking about it right now. Like it was a great one of the great nights out that I ever had at a restaurant. Great food, great company. I don't want this to turn into a commercial for like Perry's Steakhouse, but it really, it was fantastic.
Wow. Well, Gary, I've appreciated the time. I'm a huge fan. I hope you continue in the Star Wars realm, and I hope you keep doing everything you're doing. Don't change.
Thanks very much.